if we look at the overall search volume, AI is barely cracking anything. 5% of total searches are in AI now, they're saying. But if you look at survey results from Gen Z, they're all saying they go to AI first. They trust it because it delivers more deeper results and different ideas. And what would you use in the future? It's going to be AI.
Today's guest is John Steele. He is the founder of John Steele Consulting. Helps small to mid-sized businesses, especially in B2B SaaS EdTech space, boosting efficiency through integration, automation, AI, and smarter workflows.
I think it's important for folks to grasp that at least 50% of the response you're going to get from the LLM relies on your prompt. You're using ambiguous words and the model not knowing what you really meant by context because you didn't give it enough other data.
I've used ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini mostly at this point. They really want to get to yes. They really want to give you like an affirmative answer of what you're asking them. It confidently gives you like the loud wrong answer. But I think whenever AI is giving you sources, it's important to check it out.
For the audience that may not totally get content marketing or the automation of content marketing more specifically, I think it's the automation part that people would be curious about. And how are you doing it? What's it saving? That would be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, so I think it'll be helpful to start with.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the AI for Business Owners podcast. I am, as always, your host, Jeff Torello. With me today, my guest is John Steele. John, tell us about yourself.
My name is John Steele, as Jeff said. I have been working with startups and small businesses for about 12 years now. And before that, I was in the agency, digital marketing world. But in that time, I've watched one company I worked with get to exit, another raise over $160 million. And so I've sort of had an inside scoop with some companies doing interesting things in terms of their growth. And I was lucky enough to be a part of that at some of these companies. So I started my own consulting agency 2.5 years ago, and we focus on efficiency, integration, automation, and now AI for small to medium-sized businesses in the B2B SaaS EdTech space mostly for right now, but I'm expanding into other areas as we grow. We do everything from web design and development all the way to sort of just workflow and automation development for automating your workflow. So yeah, that's our main practice area.
Just to clarify, so I understand what you said, is it SaaS companies or specifically edutech at the moment is the niche?
No, it's both. So I do some work with some edtech brands, and then I do some work with some B2B SaaS, but most of my experience is with the B2B SaaS world. So that's where
Got it. Okay. Yeah, no worries. I just wanted to clarify because I wasn't sure, and I figured the audience might want to ask what that was. So from the point of view of you started a consulting company, you said a couple of years ago, and how did you get that off the ground? It's always, the trick from consulting is always your first client or clients, right? So how did you kick that off?
Yeah, right. So my initial client was a vendor that I had hired, and I came to him and I said, would you want to partner up on some client work? I know that you have clients that need what I'm talking about. We've talked about it before as a need for your business. And he and I were sort of friendly because at my previous job, I'd hired him on and we were a big client of his. So we had a close working relationship. And so I spoke to him, after launching the business and sort of said, hey, and a little bit before, to be honest, about, potentially working together. And, he had sort of expressed interest in that and expressed interest in working with one client in particular, a document management app that I ended up working with. And so first I did an analysis for him and his business, a strategy analysis, a positioning analysis for his business. And then I did one for his client as well. I ended up working in RevOps for them for 2 years, and they were my first client, real client with long-term potential. So my friend, luckily it gave me a couple of projects to work on, but they were the one that sort of stuck, and that's how we got it rolling.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
From the perspective of AI, what's your basic journey, like personal or in the company or both? Doesn't matter which way you want to answer that, but where did you start and where are you now?
Yeah, so I moved to New York in 2014, and I left the agency world in the Philadelphia area where I live now. We moved back about 5 years ago, my wife and I. But I moved up there in 2014 to move in-house with a boutique software engineering firm. And they had a lot of needs in terms of their promotion. They really only had two really large clients at the time, and they were in desperate need of landing a third. And so they were doing a lot of trade shows, they were redoing their website, they were doing a lot of things to get the word out. And we only had two people on our team. So being efficient and being able to build things at scale was super important. Even with a small team, we needed to be able to produce high level of quality content. The content needed to be into, project management workflows. It also needed to be approved by a number of stakeholders because we didn't want to say anything that, would betray our marketing team's lack of engineering competency. We wanted to make sure the engineers' voices were heard loud and clear. So it was a tough challenge, and I think I learned a lot about the need for automation and efficiency. I had worked within HubSpot quite a bit and with their content management tools up to that point, but we really got into some deep workflow and automation with that first company, and we were working through the early iteration of Pardot, Salesforce Pardot, which they later scrapped and like started over, and I've worked in that one too, but their original product was actually pretty exciting and well made. So I know they moved away from it eventually because they wanted to scale to enterprise, but it was great as a small business tool for a while there. So anyway, I learned a lot from that job and then brought it to my next role and then the next one after that. I've always worked on small teams. I've always been a first or second hire, usually after a raise, something like that at these companies. So really want to come in and maximize efficiency and not ask for like a massive marketing budget until you've earned it. And so I think that's really where it started for me.
Okay. So is that effectively, from the consulting perspective, what you're trying to help clients with is that lean and automate where possible? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, most of my clients have small teams. They have members of those teams that are green and they have, holes in their competency, skill set, things like that. Instead of hiring another, high priced executive, or, if a company's sort of still scaling up to hire their first marketing hire, they want to make sure that they're in a position to hit the ground running when they get in there. And so I think the companies that hire me tend to have a need that their current staffing cannot fill. And so I work with them in a fractional way, long-term freelance basis to sort of help them implement and then execute on their goals as it relates to integration, automation, content marketing, and all of those various things that intertwine there.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that, I guess, for the audience that may not totally get content marketing or the automation of content marketing more specifically. You maybe define it just in case, but I think it's the automation part that people would be curious about. And I'm not trying to get you to give away code on the on the
Yeah,
podcast, but
no,
like
absolutely.
the conceptual, right? What are you doing? How are you doing it? What's it saving? That would be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, so I think it'll be helpful to start with how I got my start into digital marketing to begin with, and that has really led my sort of viewpoint on this. So I started out as a journalist, and I worked for newspapers and blogs for 5 or 6 years before I got my start in digital marketing, and I learned a lot about how people find content, how to build content that people are interested in, how to tell what topics are going to resonate and which ones aren't, and sort of built my first website around that time. And so I think I've always been sort of learning about search and optimization and understanding what content is going to hit for people. And I became something of an SEO expert for the companies that I worked at. So that I would get called into meetings to sort of, you know, stress test their SEO plans and sort of talk about existing content and sort of figure out, what can we do with all of this. We have a blog with, 300 posts on it, but none of them are getting any traffic. Like, how do we improve this? How do we make this a generator for us? Things like that. And so I've always sort of come at it from that place of, we have a ton of content. This content can have value. How do we know where to prioritize? How do we know where to put our resources? How do we maximize those resources? And then how do we leverage technology to get us even further? Because I know in a lot of cases, it's so easy to turn to headcount. Let's just hire two or three people to like do all this manual work for us. And oftentimes that's just not the most cost effective solution. And there are ways around that. So, and I think content strategy nowadays is so much deeper. You can do so much more with, not only extending your content, the life of it, but also integrating it to more facets of your business. So you can now take, a content library that you have and like build a wiki and then attach a chatbot to it and then have the chatbot call that and answer questions that people have in chat from your wealth of knowledge that you've created. That's just like one application of this. But yeah, that's the way I like to think about it is I think you take the existing content assets that you have and there are 100 different ways to generate value from what you've already got. And that doesn't just extend to content, that extends to the tool set that you have. If you've got a stack that has a bunch of tools in it that you're not using to their full extent, it's possible they need to be retired, but it's also possible you're just not integrating them to their fullest extent. So there might be value there. So just searching for that value wherever you can find it and leveraging technology to create efficiencies within that.
Just a random question for you. Would you consider social media posts content marketing?
I would. So I think that user generated content is more important now than ever. So if we look at the latest algorithm updates that Google has rolled out in 2024 and 2025, they've all been around this idea of experience being just as important as expertise. So people with firsthand experience of a product, they're going to value that in search just as much or more than someone who like reviews products for a living or something. So you see that in not only the search results and the massive increase in Reddit into search results, Quora, answer engines, things like that, but then also
Yeah,
Google's purchase of Reddit data, this massive data purchase that they made recently to buy a bunch of Reddit data to train their AI on. So I think
right.
that if you're looking to get into AI searches, you have to look at user generated content. And yeah, social media is a big part of that. All the AI engines are going to be crawling social media platforms. They are going to be looking to your accounts, not only for your influence, but also for what your customers are saying about you. And
Right.
I think that experience, Google's telling us in no uncertain terms that that firsthand experience and mentions that you're getting in posts like that are going to impact you in terms of your visibility. So as long as search and AI platforms are going to continue to be a part of digital marketing, I think social media has to be considered content as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. There's been a couple other folks as guests in the past here that have talked about integration of GEO into SEO
Right.
and the idea that generative AI is replacing search for some portion of the audience, not everybody, not, no one's ever 100% anything, but I'm obviously knee deep in in the AI realm, so my knowledge is a little skewed, but I know a lot of people who don't use Google anymore and who are using various AIs to do their searching, right?
Yeah, I do as well. I do
Right.
as well.
By no means is that mainstream from my point of view with, regular mom and pop or whatever, but it also took Google some time to become pretty much mainstream for everybody. So same structure.
There's a reason why statistics are not always, you can make statistics say anything that you want because like if we look at the overall search volume, AI is barely cracking anything. 5% of total searches are in AI now, they're saying. But if you look at survey results from Gen Z and from younger millennials, it's overwhelming the experience that they are reporting with AI versus
Right.
traditional search. They're all saying they go to AI first. They're all saying that they use it, they trust it because it delivers more deeper results and different ideas. And what would you use in the future? It's going to be AI. Like so the writing's kind of on the wall and I think the way the money's moving, I think all the consultants and all of the investors see it the same way. And so, that can even become a self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways that even if not everybody's on board right away, like if the money's moving in that direction and the younger people are all telling their older parents, like this is where it's going, then you can bet that that's where it's
Yeah.
probably headed. So
The other problem with that statistic is that, that 5% is probably the AI that invokes search from inside the chat. But what it doesn't capture, and you already prefaced this with the stats aren't right, but what it doesn't capture is the training the AI data set did against what would
right.
be the websites, the SEO. So that data is in the data set, but it's not a live search, so the stats can't possibly show it. Right. Obviously.
No, yeah, absolutely. And you're starting to see things like that acquisition of data that I mentioned from Reddit. I mean, these companies
Right.
are training their AI on different websites, different popular websites that they know have a ton of content on them. So, I mean, yeah, it's obviously moving in that direction. They obviously want to infuse as much of this as they can into their products. So, yeah, that's you might not have a choice in a while.
No, I agree. My opinion is from the perspective of if you've got a website, a product, a service, a SaaS, or whatever, you have to be on the cutting edge, and it's not just SEO only. I think SEO is not dead. I don't think SEO goes away tomorrow. I think that's irrelevant and not true statement. But I also think it's not SEO only. I think it's some other stuff. So, it used to be robots.txt. Now it's LLMs.txt. Now it's more and more and more, right? So here, just an opinion question for you. I don't know that there's any right or wrong, but there's a nascent theory of AI generated content being used to train AI, or the concept of, the snake eating its tail, et cetera,
Sure.
where the more people are using AI generation for content and the more training that happens for the next model that's literally training itself, we're in this sort of loop of reality is not true anymore, right? What do you think about that conceptually? I know that's not like, you can't have a definitive answer, but
I've experimented with it a little bit. I mean, I'll ask Claude something and then I'll see its answer be a little bit deficient or missing some key facts. And then I'll go over to Google and get an AI overview of something and just copy and paste it into, Claude and see like, hey, this is what this other guy said. What do you think of that? I think that seeing the way that they react to each other's data. I've used, ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini mostly at this point, although I did try out DeepSeek and Manus a little bit as well. But where I've seen the connection between most of them, and I haven't seen this really like divert from this on any of the platforms, is they really want to get to yes. They really want to give you like an affirmative answer of what you're asking them. So I
yeah.
think if they're going to be a trustworthy source, that needs to be adjusted or they need to learn. You want it to have the ambition to keep going. So obviously you want to train the AI on getting to a successful outcome. But I think if you see the AI sort of starting to try and tell you yes for a lot of things. I know ChatGPT's most widely used platform, and there have been some pretty hilarious like social media takedowns of it, just saying like, look at this, get a load of this, asking it
Yeah.
questions that it confidently gives you like the like loud wrong answer for it. And in a way that they want to get to a yes answer. So what I've seen with Claude and Anthropic is they sort of try and pivot you onto a competency that they have. They sort of try and steer you towards, hey, maybe I can give you an outline or a step by step on how to do this yourself. And even if you've sort of connected them and given them access to things, if they haven't crawled it deeply enough or they haven't had enough training on it, then they will sort of pivot you over to something else. So I do wonder as you integrate it more with other platforms that are also themselves using AI, if it'll just be a learning experience for the algorithm and they're going to have to turn the dials a bit to figure out the best way to handle that. I definitely do see them learn as I'm using them. So,
Yeah, there's two pieces here that I think are interesting. I want to come back to this after I talk about prompting, but I want to talk a little bit about hybrid search and your opinion there. So like
mhm.
Perplexity or competitors. But before we do that, I think mainly for the audience, I don't expect that this is new for you, John, but just since we're doing a podcast. In the early days of the models, hallucinating was pretty common. It's gotten better in a couple different ways. Some of it is the models getting better by far, and they certainly are way better than if you go back and talk to GPT 3.5 Turbo, which was the first real chat GPT that, exploded in November of 22. If you go back and talk to that and compare it to like GPT-5 now or Claude 4, whatever, you'll still say, oof, why did we even use that? Because there's a marked difference. And as there should be, right? We want things to improve. But one of the things that's happened here is that over the course of 25 years or so, Google has trained us all to be bad at prompting an LLM and to be good at searching with keywords, which unfortunately drops a lot of context that the LLM needs in order to be more accurate responder. And so in the beginning, everyone was Google searching the LLM. And by doing that, you're not providing enough context. And so the LLM had to fill in, and that's where a lot of hallucinations came from to begin with. people are still having the prompting problem, but the LLMs have gotten better at, hang on a second, let's not, we know what they're doing from a perspective of why they ask these sort of cryptic questions. I think it's important for folks to grasp that at least 50% of the response you're going to get from the LLM relies on your prompt. And I don't think most people understand that from a mathematical perspective. It's a data science thing, but the idea is your input is so much more important to the output than you typically realize. And the more exploratory and defining you are in your prompt, the more things you tell it not to do and the things you tell it to focus on, the better your overall output ends up being. And that's a key thing for folks to grasp, because it is a portion under your control. Now, you're not going to solve the model filling in gaps it doesn't know. And as you were just talking about, answering questions confidently wrong. Got it. Because its training data set has the completely wrong answer, and that's where it's going to come from. But I've used examples in the past about, using ambiguous words and the model not knowing what you really meant by context because you didn't give it enough other data. And so it picks the wrong ambiguity, and you're like, no, that's totally wrong. All you had to do is add a couple more words and you would have never done it. Those sorts of things from a prompting perspective. Let me stop and let you comment or agree or disagree with that, and then I'll talk to you about hybrid stuff.
There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, from an SEO perspective, I think like the idea that keywords are sort of on their way out. I mean, if you were still over leveraging the importance of things like keyword research, and look, I mean, I talk about keyword research on my website. It's not like it's something that we don't do anymore, but I mean, it's much more of a way to track topics that your website covers and to sort of track semantic relationships between those topic areas and things like that. And topics have been shifting to more questions, more long tail searches, more specificity, things like that. And as, platforms have ingested more of your data because more of your data is available to them, like they make assumptions about you that makes the search even better for you. So again, you are not as good at delivering a prompt like you said. So I definitely agree with that. I think what I've seen though is people aren't realizing, and maybe it doesn't work for the common consumer application, but as a marketer, I have seen the tremendous utility in being able to tell your AI where to get information as well as what information you want. So you can say to it, do this thing for me, but you can also, if you start connecting it to different tools you have, you can say, go here for this, go here for this, go here for this. It can figure out anything that's missing from that based on the sort of specificity of like where you're telling it to go and the workflow that you're trying to get it to employ. So I think people, as they start to integrate different facets of their lives with this, because I think that's where this is heading. I mean, any survey of privacy is like null anymore. People don't really seem to care at all. And so it's like, if it makes my life easier, like, yeah, just read. I had nothing to hide, read through my emails, do whatever you want. So I think like there might be some, people might want to pump the brakes on some of that. But as I do imagine, you're going to see some people integrating more of their lives with these things. And as they do that, I think they want to start prompting it not only to ask it a question, but also like, where do you want it to get the information from? Where do you want it to search for the information to give you the best answer you can get? We've all had an experience of searching Google for some kind of vague term that relates to not only an actor or a movie an actor was in, but also like a new product that's on the market, but also like a new app that you want to download to your phone. And just like, how do I tell Google which one I'm looking for here? They all have the same name. So, there are ways that people get around that, but I think that sort of quirk with AI is going to be super useful, especially as AI, as it looks like it's going to go towards more like personalized engines or agents, things like that. I think that's going to be an interesting part of this in terms of the way people improve prompting.
The way I see the privacy and security piece of what you were talking about there going is, I think what will happen is people will end up with a personalized agent, like a Iron Man Jarvis kind of tool of some sort, whatever that looks like. And it may be the thing that comes in your phone. I'm not going to say the names, but or it may be a thing that you purchase. There's a lot of variety for that. But I think what will happen is you'll end up with a personalized agent that acts on your behalf in a lot of ways, and that agent has a lot of your personal data, your private, secure, whatever. And then you can set structure and parameters around what data you're willing to just let marketers have, what data marketers have to acquire in some fashion, whether that's purchase or something else. Or I suspect that what'll happen is, you can set defaults like, don't opt in for mail, don't whatever, and then your agent will operate that way when it interacts with other stuff. And a lot of those interactions won't be necessarily directly on a website interface. It'll be with, an MCP tool or an API or some variation thereof.
Right.
It'll perform the same functions that a UI performs, but it'll just do it, agentically behind the scenes. And I think you'll be able to, again, if people are interested in your comment about a lot of newer folks aren't interested, but you'll be able to control that privacy from your point of view with settings and preferences, et cetera. I do think that there will be this actor on your behalf modality that we've wanted for a while and haven't really been able to get to. And the existing assistants, inside an Android device or inside an iOS device are very limited in what they can do today. People have been asking why Apple Intelligence isn't intelligent kind of in any way, and why it hasn't improved on that assistant that's in that phone when it sure as heck seems like it could. And Apple's obviously been having trouble making it work the way they want it to work. Otherwise, they would have released something by now. So there's certainly some problems going on there. But I do expect that that's kind of where things are going to go and where people want it to go. In fact, when that tool first came out, when Amazon's, Google's, and Apple's, everybody was asking it to do things it couldn't do, right? Instantaneously. Sure. Okay, tell me a joke. Sure, great. And, asking the Amazon guy to tell you a joke about the pod bay door. Everyone did that once. And then very quickly they were like, well, that was a party trick, but I'm done now, and I would like it to do more useful things.
Yeah.
And they never could, right?
I remember having that experience with the Amazon Alexa where, I got it and I was interested in trying some different things out. And it was like, oh, so really, I'm just using this thing to like get the weather in the morning. And like, that's pretty much it. It's got really, really limited utility. And especially as Amazon's tried to leverage it more, you get things like when you try and play music on it, I've connected to Spotify every other time I've ever used it. Why are you suggesting Amazon Music? I'm not going to switch to Amazon Music. Like, why are you doing that? So stuff like that. And my concern is that, like, to your point about like having a personalized AI agent, like I would love it if they activated privacy settings, but there's a lot of money for them to be made in having this level of access to us. And so my concern would be, hey, if you want a Jarvis, you can have it straight from Marvel. We just get to own all of your data once you do it. And, you can be exactly like Tony Stark and it can do all the same stuff. And the interface looks like it does in Iron Man, which is our collateral and we own that. But you just got to tell us every living thing about yourself. And we get to collect all of that. And we're the only ones, like, we'll protect your data until the server's breached.
Until it's not, right,
we're
until it's
the
not
ones.
protected.
And then you go with them, and then the next person comes along and goes, well, we can do this different thing. You should join us too. Kind of like we do with the streaming services, where we went from one cable company that we all hated to 7 different platforms. And then, hey, if you want to watch the football game tonight, you got to add an 8th. And so that's my concern with it, is that it becomes a spread of our data that is uncontrollable.
Well, and the real problem is each one of those vendors sells the data to a broker who all the other ones buy from. So in the end, it's the same picture of you. It's just the shards they all come together. I think my opinion here, I think there'll be vendors who will purport and sell privacy and security versions of agents, and there will be vendors who do what you're talking about. And I think the folks who are concerned and care will go after the privacy ones, and the folks who want that Iron Man Marvel interface will just do it, and they'll give away whatever they give away, because it happens today, right? There's plenty of folks who use some of the social media tools and just give everything away, and there's some folks who are like, nope, I refuse to use Gmail. I use Proton Mail. I refuse to use WhatsApp. I use Signal, on and on and on.
I mean,
but those are the people who are searching for it.
Garmin used to be a Christmas present. Like, people would get that. It was $200. It was a Garmin that would sit in your car and it could tell you where to go. And you don't have to print MapQuest directions anymore. And then everybody was like, Google, please take all of my location data forever. I mean, the amount of money that we ceded to Google is immeasurable. Like, that data is so valuable. And we were just like, I want to save $200 and get directions on my phone right now. Like, tell me what's up. We gave it right over. So Yeah, I am concerned about that a little bit, that we're selling ourselves cheap, but who
It's
knows?
a real problem, but I think the issue is very few people can see the downside. It's not easily identified, and for, your average consumer who, works their 9 to 5, comes home, cooks dinner, puts the kids to bed, and just uses their social tools to hang out, like they don't see what the negativity, where are they being impacted, and it's a hard sell, so
And you
the,
probably don't get here with AI without it. I mean, you probably can't build a large language model unless there are centralized repositories of data with just like billions of terabytes of data in them, with personal identifiable information in them. You probably can't build these models without that all being on the internet for everyone to see, and us being cool with our privacy being out there. So
there's always pros and cons. There's always trade-offs. I do think in general, on balance, the amount of democratized data access on the internet is positive. There are data brokers that sell information you probably don't want out there. There are ways to go about trying to get it removed, but it always comes back. But the other side of that equation is, it's also, as we've moved forward societally, some of that data is nowhere near as important as it used to be, not as easy to use against you, because there's been a lot of protections put in place that just because you have an address doesn't mean that you're the person at the address. Just because you have this piece of information, right? As opposed to, you used to be able to, like, if you go back far enough, people will be like, okay, well, where do you live? I live here. Okay, then I'll let you have this access. Wait a minute. What? I didn't even show you anything. I just said the words. That's not how security works. That's moved forward a little bit. You can still do pretty nefarious things, but thankfully those are nowhere near as common as they could be. People could always take advantage of what's out there, but I do think on balance, like I said, the data training, the LLMs, like all the historical information that's just been published and publicly accessible, and not just Wikipedia, but lots of sites, has helped with the idea that you can ask an LLM a random question about Mount Rushmore, and it can answer that question for the most part. But then the next equation to solve, that you and I are not solving, but the next equation to solve is, well, how accurate is that answer, right? But what I think is important to frame for folks is, when you were Google searching 5 years ago before AI,
right.
and you got a result and you went to a website, how accurate was that answer? Because it's the same question. And at some point, we seem to have intuited, well, just because it's sitting on this website doesn't mean it's reality or factual. It could be true. It could be trash. And then people would make justification calls based on where they were. So am I looking at some random blog that's on, blogger.com or WordPress, or am I looking at, pick a newspaper, it doesn't matter which one. And you would adjudicate the value of that content differently based on those two sources. But now the AI is answering you, and you don't know where it's getting it from most of the time. So it's a question that I don't think can be easily answered. I've seen some citation work starting to happen with the LLMs, where they start putting out, here's the answer, and it came from here. And that is actually the segue I wanted to get us to, which is like perplexity.ai, which is a hybrid search engine, which is both keyword searching and semantic searching. And then almost every single thing you get out of Perplexity has citations and links to where it came from. What do you think about that?
With any source that AI is going to give you, it's important to click on it and check it out and see where it's coming from. They are really trying to find the they're trying to get to yes, as we said before. And so they're trying to give you what you asked for. And what you asked for was loaded with bias because you want a certain result to come from that. I think one of the tricks that Google, and one of the reasons I think Reddit has become such a source, is because there are moderating influences to where if enough people liked a response, then it sort of rises to the top. If enough people upvote a response on Reddit, it rises up. If enough people link to a blog post on Google for a certain topic, then it rises to the top of the searches. And so you end up with results that are gate kept by the masses, essentially, versus something like, let's take the Apple App Store, for example. It's a different model than the Android store, where there's like a walled garden. There's a sort of a gatekeeper in front of that. And they say, this is how we're going to adjudicate this. And all of our criteria for that is online and you can see it, but this is how we're doing it. So I think there are different models and ways of doing it, but I think whenever AI is giving you sources, it's important to check it out. I've had a number of searches where I say to one of these AI tools, hey, bring me this information. And I'll be like, wow, that's like exactly what I wanted. Give me the source. And they'll give you some blog post that is not reputable. And usually the information is not wrong, it's just incomplete. And so then you go and search the thing that they pulled out and you can sort of find a more reputable source and use that. And so I think AI is still at this point something that you need to edit and be wary of and be careful with because it will give you false information. I just today asked Claude, to help me package a fantasy football trade. And they said like some stuff about week 2 and week 3 of the NFL season. And I said, wait a second, we just passed through week 1, guy. Like, no, incorrect entirely. So I can't trust that for that information at all. So I
Yeah.
just scrapped everything that it told me and, you know, went and did my research the old fashioned way, So I think you just have to be careful. And I would ask it, where are you getting this information from? Give me sources for everyone, because a lot of times they will just make recommendations based on what they think you want to hear. They won't provide any source. And, AI overviews are kind of the same way. They will just provide you with answers. And some of the sources are there, but in text only with no depth. And sort of they'll make intuitive assumptions about things that are incorrect. So you really have to be careful of the information you hear. Unfortunately, I think a good amount of people are not capable of that. I think misinformation is rampant for a reason. So, people got to be careful. They got to be careful with the results they get from it.
I agree with what you're saying. I would recommend the same thing. I just don't believe many people will actually check the sources, and
Yeah.
the reason why, as you're probably exceptionally well aware, from the perspective of like marketing and advertising right now, you're looking at a minimum, just this is like September 2025. You're looking at a minimum of 8 impressions to get something seen, and you have 3 seconds to get it across, or see ya. They're not going to see anything else. In that context, in the world of that short attention span, and that's not even, I couldn't define it as an attention span. I could define it as a blink. But in any
I've
event,
seen 8, but I've also seen 11, which is a lifetime, Jeff. A lifetime. You can get anybody to believe anything in 11 seconds. Those 3
yeah,
seconds are critical.
but from that contextually, like, I don't think anyone's checking the source. I think they're looking at the overview or the first response and taking it and running. Here's what it's going to lead to. It's going to lead to less than 3 seconds because people are going to have even more garbage thrown in front of them. And like, this problem is not a problem that solves itself. This is a problem that drives itself into the ground. Oh, I can't, 8 impressions doesn't work anymore. Now I need to do 20 impressions. And in 3 seconds, it's no longer 3 seconds. It's 1.5, right? Like,
Yeah, no,
the
absolutely.
tool will become unusable because you'll just be bombarded with the things, right?
Right. Well, and they're trying desperately to remove a lot of manual processes. And I think, search is definitely one of them. So they want to anticipate your needs before they ask a question.
Right.
My Funnel Vision newsletter, which is available at johnsteeleconsulting.com. Please go check it out. But I do a breakdown every 2 weeks of like a workflow that people are talking about or an automation that people are talking about. My latest one that I'm going to put out tomorrow is about motion and sort of the AI agents that they're bringing out. The interesting thing there is you're giving it access to things like your email, things like your task management software, and you're asking it to like read your emails, see that a big deal is closed, update Salesforce with into the deal flow, then create a task list in Asana and create a meeting invite to all the stakeholders. And if there's one like misunderstanding or one like, assumption that they made that's incorrect, like where does that leave you? How do you iron those things out? Is it just a learning process where like we went through with hallucinations? Is it just like you're troubleshooting a Zapier workflow? Because I know a number of the skills that they're training their agents on are similar to like Zapier workflows. Is it just troubleshooting? Are there pain points that are bigger than that before you get to it? Are you going to accidentally invite the whole company to a meeting 12 times before you figure it out? And other little embarrassing things you got to go through. So yeah, I think people just need to be careful, and they need to test these things out carefully as they go. And as the numbers are currently small, like I said, I hope that the people that are trying it out now or people that are experimenting and not sort of giving their lives over to it yet. But I'll be interested to see where it goes.
Yeah, me too. I totally agree. John, this has been a fun discussion.
Yeah,
I had a good
absolutely.
time. Any closing comments or thoughts you want to throw at it?
Yeah, definitely. So I mentioned johnsteeleconsulting.com. I started this company 2.5 years ago, and I think we've got sort of a unique perspective on startups and SMBs. We use these startup sprints that sort of address the different phases of startup and small business and where there might be gaps. I think we fit in nicely to any number of different teams and can help you out with these types of efficiencies, as I mentioned on this call. And I'd just like to say that I think automation and AI are really exciting prospects, despite all of our reservations set on this call. I'm definitely, hesitant about certain levels of it, but I am excited to see any new innovation that can help people start and maintain small businesses, because I've seen the amazing side of a startup that can really take off when these things are in place. So it makes me excited for what people can build these things.
I would add, just to echo what you're saying there, if you just think about any technology innovation or even non-technology, there's always glitches, there's always stumbles, there's whatever. Nothing's ever perfect. So I do think AI is here to stay. I do think we'll solve a lot of these problems and we'll make it better, but also keep your eyes open, folks. There's things out there that can hurt. All right, cool. Thanks a lot. I appreciate the time. It's great talking to you.
Absolutely, Jeff. Thanks again.